Today you join me in Colmar, France, and we're talking Squale, particularly this piece. Now this is not Italy, and that would have been more appropriate, but this is going to have to do. Now for me, the entire fascination with this particular brand, Squale, begins actually with TGV. I think you all know who TGV is, and his channel is one of the largest watch channels on YouTube. And he kind of introduced the brand to a lot of people, I guess most of the people that now herald this as a really good option around the $1,000 mark. So now his plethora of videos and his collaboration with the brand, I think, is what put the brand on the map for most of us watch enthusiasts. If not, let me know in the comments. So my question regarding this piece and the Squale brand in general is to answer whether it's cut from the same cloth as its competitors, essentially the same watches in this $1,000 price bracket. Now when this bus goes by, I can continue with the video. Okay, so let's continue. So essentially its competitors include Tissot, Mido, Zinn, perhaps Nomos, and stuff like Christopher Ward, everything in the $1,000 price bracket. I'd say Longines is a bracket above, and perhaps even Nomos. So through this watch, the Squale SUB-39, I want to answer that question and give my thoughts on this particular piece as well. Let's get into it. So now let's go over the aesthetics of this watch, which are quite important because this piece is a three-hander and it's a really beautiful one at that. And I think the entire attraction behind this watch is because of the dial, because of the characteristics of the case, especially the box sapphire crystal. That's quite a delight to remark. But it's got a lot of vintage cues, which is not really to my taste because I like new watches, I like watches to be modern. This watch is based on a Squale from, I'm not sure, the 60s, 70s. They've essentially redone this piece and they could have made it more modern, I think. I like the case shape and the design and a lot of the facets. Just don't like the patina that they've added to it to make it more vintage style. And I'm not sure about this bezel. So I'm trying to get a quieter location to film, but we're in the middle of Colmar and that's not really that possible. Now the watch itself is in a blue version. It's got a really deep, rich, dark blue sunburst style. This is really odd, this feeling of people walking by and me trying to say what I want to convey about this piece. But anyway, we move on. So the blue sunburst style, it's got kind of a smoky aspect to it. It's not really smoky, it's just a deeper rich blue depending on at which angle you look at it. And because of the sunburst effect, that's kind of what you get. It's not a lighter blue like in some of the pictures or videos. At night it looks kind of black. So let's switch over to voiceover as it was a bit too chaotic to film in the city. So more on the dial. As a three-hander with a standard out-of-the-box movement, the aesthetics are all crucial to making this watch desirable. The dial is a multifaceted deep blue thanks to the sunburst that shades sections of it darker, like different colors in a pie chart. A quick rotation of the watch lets you swap these sections around. It's kind of fun to play with, but that's just sunburst. It's pretty common. Perhaps this is a boring take, but with this kind of blue, I'm not sure I want the sunburst effect. I don't like the contrast within this shade as much as with some other colors. This is a bit too dark. An interesting aspect with regards to intentionally breaking symmetry is the Squale logo. The small diagram above the Squale text is off-centered to the left. I like this touch. I'm not someone that cares all that much for symmetry in watches. I think the lack of symmetry is perhaps even somewhat crucial in a more plain time and date only watch. It just makes it more interesting. Speaking of the date window, it is quite a prominent interruption to the dial because of the contoured white box. I didn't notice it as much, but I think a 6 o'clock or a 4:30 date might have been slightly more interesting. The most characteristic touch of this watch, following a vintage aesthetic, is the use of the box sapphire crystal. I think this is a really cool addition. However, a box sapphire is not a crystal you want on your everyday watch. It almost has a little too much personality and distortion. Also, its protrusion above the case makes it a lot easier to scuff it against the underside of a table or a narrow door frame, and at least to me this happens a lot more often than I would like it to. However, it being sapphire relieves some of those acrylic, hesselite and hardlex crystal annoyances of being scratched extremely easily. For example, this particular watch is about 5 years old and it's in pretty great condition. It's not my watch, so I can't say that I wouldn't have scratched it up. But this one has survived the 5 years without scratches on the crystal. Plenty of small ones on the case though. Next up, the hands. There's something about the hands that I don't quite enjoy as much as the rest of the watch. They seem ever so slightly out of proportion, out of place to me. I thought my issue is to do with the sizing of the hands. They seem kind of small in this dial, but with a closer look, they're not really oddly small or weirdly proportionate. They're quite normal. Then I thought, okay, it's got to be either the shape or the thickness. It just feels like something doesn't quite match to me and I can't pinpoint exactly what. What do you think? So moving to the bezel, this bezel lends this watch plenty of nautical charm. It somehow really looks like it's straight out of a boat. Even the font for some reason. I think the font on the bezel is rather cool, however, it doesn't pair too well with the font and lume on the dial. I'm not a fan of the contrast between the patina and clear white font. I really would have liked all of it to have been white. Moving to the right with the crown design. What's absolutely interesting about this watch crown is that it's a screw down mechanism. The way the crown is designed makes this pleasant deception possible. It's got that old school push pull knob kind of design, almost like a choke in an old carburetor car. But once you spot the 30 atmos on the dial, that kind of becomes clear. You do need that screw down mechanism to protect it for that kind of water resistance rating. That's also something rather surprising. 300 meters is no joke, on par with the Seamaster and Submariners. That's too on sort of a reissue watch that's really aesthetics focused and not meant to be taken seriously as a tool, which is also made evident by the vivid blue leather strap on a diver watch. Now the lug design and width. This has got 22 millimeters as its lug width. That's oddly large for a case diameter of only 40 millimeters. 40 with the overhanging bezel, 39 with just the case itself. I find the lug design sleek when the watch sits on a table when it's flat, but I find it annoying on the wrist. I really don't like the gaps between the insufficiently curved spring bar strap configuration and the case. I don't find that appealing. One nice thing is it comes with quick release spring bars on the strap, which is an easily overlooked small convenience benefit that I'm glad Squale decided to go with. However, this does mean that you would have to get another set of spring bars if you choose to go with some other strap. The movement on this piece is the Sellita SW200, and that's about as much as I want to say about it. It's a pretty standard, ubiquitous, robust, easy to service movement that just works. It's in all these watches in the $1,000 to $2,000 price category. For reference, this watch is about 4 or 5 years old and it's never had a service and runs great. How does this watch wear? I would say this piece wears a little larger than the typical 39mm watch due to those protruding old-fashioned lugs. Some may like that vintage appeal. I am not some. The thickness at 12mm is rather good for this level of water resistance. The 22mm lug width is an interesting choice. It's particularly large for these dimensions of watch. They could have reproportioned the watch a little bit and made it 20. Everyone likes 20mm lug widths, and that would make more sense too. It's not out of place here, but I think it's just a little bit odd. So the watch itself sits very flat on the wrist. It doesn't have much contour despite the declined lugs, and that's very noticeable. It feels kind of generic on the wrist to me. I don't have too much to say here. It's not a watch that really speaks out to you in terms of how it sits on the wrist and how it feels on the wrist. It looks great. The aesthetics are there, but in terms of the tactile feeling, it's pretty standard. So is this piece cut from the same cloth as its competitors and worth the $1,000 to $2,000 price bracket? Well, this is closer to the $1,000 mark. And I would say just about, yeah, it is definitely worth that price. It's a solid offering with specs to match its price. 300 meters of water resistance is getting more common these days in the lower priced watches, but it's still rather fantastic. I would just say this is not my type of watch pick in this price bracket. I would go with Sin or Nomos, even though, okay, those are really not type watches and they're completely different to this. I would still look at those two brands. Very, very different watches, different purposes. I guess they're not really comparable, but I would still go with those in this mark because I think they offer more value. Cheers. See you in the next vid.